21,101 miles. That's the exact mileage at the time of recording this video. It was just about right now, actually. I'm recording this at about 10 in the morning, which is when we picked up the Model 3 on August 24th of last year. It's been an amazing year. It's been a wild ride, and in today's review, it's gonna be a big one. We're not going as specific as we usually do on this channel. I'm going to be trying to answer as many of your questions as I can, which I got over on X when I asked you guys what I should cover in my 1-year ownership update video. So of course there's chapters down below if you want to skip around, and we're going to get into some nitty-gritty numbers. So if you like finances and expenses, I hope you're going to enjoy this one as well. So according to the Tesla app, which I've plugged in pretty accurate data to in the charge stats section, in the past year I've spent $1,265 on electricity. Now this number is going to be a little bit skewed, partly because the referral program was just added a couple months ago, so my average price of supercharging has been slowly dropping the more and more I do these big road trips, because you guys have been using my referral code, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you. But yes, that's still a pretty high number, unfortunately, because home charging, at least where I live, is pretty dang expensive. Even if you're on a specific EV tier, basically for us, our off-peak electricity still costs 25 cents a kilowatt hour. That's a lot compared to the rest of the country, and that's when the bulk of my car was being charged at home during off-peak hours. But the good news is, as expensive as electricity is, where I live, gasoline is even worse. Especially right now, there's a lot of gas stations that are charging well over $5 a gallon. And typically across the country, I tend to see that go hand in hand. If you live in an area with really cheap electricity, you tend to have cheaper gas, and if you live in an area with expensive electricity, you tend to have more expensive gas. So I feel like this kind of scales depending on where you are. There's a handful of exceptions in the US, I think, where electricity is really high and gas is really low, but I don't think that's the standard. So basing on Tesla's average, I've actually saved $1,891 by not having to pay for gas. They're just basing that off of the average price of gasoline in the areas that we were driving around. And also in the past year, I've had my tires rotated twice. I'm probably nearing my third here pretty soon. Each one was done by Les Schwab for $28 a pop. And actually just a couple days ago, I had a leaky tire. Turned out I ran over a tiny little nail and it cost me 20 bucks. Les Schwab patched it up for me and the car's all good now. But in case some of you are wondering why don't I rotate the tires myself, well, for one, as you could probably tell, my garage space is a little limited. I don't have a ton of space in here, and the equipment I would need, I don't have jacks, I don't have the little Model 3 pucks that you gotta mount in position to prop the car up. I spec'd all of that out on Amazon and realized it was gonna cost a couple $100, which would easily pay for a few tire rotations. And then the biggest difference is once you inevitably replace the tires on your car, wherever you buy the tires from, they will rotate them for free then on after. So for now, yes, the tire rotations are costing me 28 bucks, but because this is still my first set of tires, I gotta pay for those rotations. But once a couple years go by and the tires are ready to be replaced, I'll probably buy them from Les Schwab or Big O or somebody and try to get a good deal on them, and then all the rotations will be free then on after. And after doing the math, it just looked like doing the rotations myself wasn't gonna be worth it. And that's also partly because I live in a place where it doesn't snow, so I don't have to change my tires for the different types of weather. It very rarely rains where I am anyway, so I don't mind someone else doing the tire maintenance for me. But at least from what I've gathered, looking at my tires in the current state, they're in really good condition. In fact, I know a lot of people tend to be kind of a lead foot with Teslas, and that tends to wear out the tires a bit faster. I consider myself more of a feather foot, as in my car is in chill mode perpetually. Like, I never turn off chill mode, and even with chill mode on, I pretty much never floor it. Like, I never accelerate that hard. I live in a pretty rural area, so it's pretty rare that I need to make an extremely aggressive entrance onto the freeway. So I've checked on my tires periodically just to see how they're doing, and they're still holding up great. I know Tesla recommends you replace them every 50,000 miles or something like that, but I'm pretty sure because this is a rear-wheel drive Tesla, it's the lightest Model 3 that they currently still make, and I'm a bit of a featherfoot. I could probably push these tires a little bit further, partly because we don't live in a place where it gets really icy or very cold, and of course I want to see like how long we can get the original set of tires to last. So I'll be safe. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything dangerous, but I'm very happy with how the tires are holding up thus far. But now let's talk about insurance. This is something that tends to eat into the gas savings that a Tesla offers quite a bit, unfortunately. And that's especially going to be the case considering our last car was like a 2007 Hyundai Sonata. Very very cheap to insure. It was about 40 bucks a month. Whereas this car, even though we go with Tesla insurance and they let you customize it to cover whatever you want, the first 6 months they were charging us $81.23, which based on what I've seen other people paying, I still think that's a pretty good price considering our age and our area, but we have pretty high deductibles, unfortunately, with our insurance plan, and I'm a very safe driver. I've never caused any accidents or anything like that, so we're basically just very covered, essentially, if we get hit by somebody else that doesn't have insurance, but if I do something, I'm gonna have to pay for a lot out of pocket, and that's why I'm just an overly cautious driver. I got the slowest Tesla possible. But what's interesting is after 6 months, for no rhyme or reason, Tesla actually lowered the price of our insurance. No idea why. You know, they don't base insurance prices on safety scores out in California. For some reason, they're not allowed to do that, but it went down to $72.49 a month after the 6 months. Maybe it's because we got older, but I've had friends that worked in insurance companies and they said that that's a myth, that your insurance rates aren't affected by your age. I don't know why they went down, but I'm not complaining. So the insurance prices went a little bit down, but that brings our total cost of insuring this car over the past year to $922.32. But that's not the worst part, okay? Insurance, I kind of expect to go up when you buy a higher end car. Even if that car is somewhat cheaper to own in some ways, yeah, the insurance is going to go up a bit. But the real killer comes down to the state of California, unfortunately, who charged me $666 to register this vehicle, which is way more than what we were paying on our old car. But there's a few reasons for that. For one, the registration amount should change based on the value of the car. So because this car is so new, they're charging a lot for it, but as it gets older and depreciates, that registration should go down. Here's hoping, fingers crossed. But the truth is, it will never go down as much as it did for our Hyundai Sonata, which only cost about $120 a year to insure, because California, just like many other states, including Texas now, is pushing the road taxes into your registration. See, when you have a gas vehicle, you don't pay your road taxes through your registration because you're paying that road tax, which is, you know, what states charge to maintain infrastructure on the highways in the city streets. They charge all that at the gas pump. So if your gas prices seem higher in different states, that's because the road taxes tend to be higher in places where there's more people. But because electric vehicles are not paying for gasoline, they have pushed those road taxes into the registration fees, which is why electric vehicles unfortunately have such high registration amounts, which is definitely a huge bummer. I'm hoping that goes down with time, but I don't have a lot of faith in it. And the one last expense that I will mention, which is totally optional, in fact, I will recommend you guys don't do it, is that once, shortly after getting the car, I subscribed to full self-driving for $200 just for that 1 month, and I definitely regretted it. Navigate on autopilot sucked, super unreliable, made way too many lane changes, and I opted to go in on the beta, but my car, I guess, was on too new of a software version, and because Tesla was so slow with updating the beta, I never got full self-driving beta on the car. Even though I asked for it and I paid for it, I was going to have to pay for it for probably 2 or 3 more months before Tesla got around to actually pushing it to my car's software version, which in my opinion is such a stupid system. I feel like you should get the beta right away. And when asking you guys more recently, when they let you get 90 days of FSD beta through the referral program, I was like, how long is this going to take to get on my car? There still is not a very clear answer. It seems like even the Tesla enthusiasts in the full self-driving community couldn't give a straight word on it. They're like, I don't know, it might be a week, it might be 2 weeks, it might be a month. And I was like, okay, I'm not wasting credits on a hopefully it shows up one day, because I just appreciate the free supercharging. That's awesome. So that brings our total to all of our expenses just for owning this vehicle for the past year to $3,129.32. Now, if we subtract the gas savings from that, it still brings us to $1,238.32 of ownership just in registration, tires, FSD, unfortunately, and insurance. So I'm hoping those prices can kind of let you guys know, for people that are thinking about making the big jump to buying an electric vehicle, and maybe you've never bought a vehicle this expensive before, I don't think you should really do it to save money. I know that's an easy argument to be made that is often brought up by content creators and people over on X, saying like, oh yeah, you buy an EV, it's cheaper to own, it's so much cheaper. The truth is, a lot of these things, like, sure, okay, maybe you get electricity that's cheaper than mine in your area, but things like registration or things like insurance is a lot harder to fight inherently with a more expensive car. Even with its federal tax credits and even with the discounted pricing, it's just inherently a more high-end vehicle than what a lot of us are used to buying, and that means when things break or you need to replace your tires faster because EVs are heavier, that cost of ownership definitely eats into all of that money you were spending on gasoline. Now, the idea, hopefully, is that these cars have less things that can go wrong because there's no combustion engine. You know, just this week, our old Hyundai Sonata, which we pretty much never drive, but we let my mom drive it when she's visiting, or other family members can borrow it when they're in town. They just had an issue with the starter, and we're still trying to figure out if the alternator needs to be worked on. And, you know, there's more maintenance and service that come with owning a gas car as well, like changing the oil, changing the brake pads, which should last for the life of the car with these electric vehicles, assuming you have decent regenerative braking. But still, knowing that after gas savings, there's still $1,200 in expenses, you know, $1,200 could pay for a lot of oil changes or brake pads or, you know, starter replacements, which are not terribly expensive. It's usually like $100 or $200. So while yes, it's far more enjoyable to own an EV, in my opinion, it's far more convenient to charge from home. They're so much quieter. They get better with time with over-the-air updates. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still all in favor of saying that electric vehicles are better vehicles, and I think they're the future, and I do think everybody's going to want one eventually, but I don't think the argument that they will save you money is honestly that strong. At least where I live, it may be different, but if you're comparing it to, you know, what we used to buy, which was used gas cars for sub $10,000, yeah, I'm pretty sure the overall savings of this car would take like, you know, 20 or 30 years of ownership before it's actually starting to break even or save me money compared to my old cheap gas car. But that old cheap gas car was a lot less fun to drive, and it wasn't as enjoyable to own as this vehicle. This one's a lot more comfortable, a lot more fun to ride in, it's got a lot more storage space, and it's a lot more beautiful aesthetically, which, you know, there's some value to be had in that, I'm sure. But another question you guys asked about was Tesla service. Like, I should document all of the mobile and in-person Tesla service appointments I had, which unfortunately still seems to be a pretty common thing, even with new Teslas these days. And it started right away when we first got the car. We noticed some window misalignments on the driver's side, so we had to go to the Tesla service center 3 times within the first couple months, because we would book an appointment, they would say they could fix it, and then they didn't. So we'd go back again, and they still didn't quite fix it. They got it better, but not quite eliminated the wind noise. And I was really torn on this because we don't live close to a service center, and it was costing us time and money because we'd have to drive the Sonata around with gas while the Tesla was in the shop. So I hesitated to go back for the 3rd time because the wind noise was honestly not that bad. It was just a little bit noticeable, but my friends on the EV podcast convinced me, no, Drew, just try it, get it done, put your foot down, get angry, get mad in there, and tell them they have to fix it. And after the 3rd service visit, it felt almost completely fixed. It still wasn't really consistent. There were times where I didn't hear any wind noise, and then other times where I heard a little bit more, but not as bad as when I first got the car. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with temperature. Like, I notice it more in the colder weather, and in the hot weather, it's not super noticeable. So not the end of the world. The service appointments were honestly annoying me far more than the wind noise was, because typically you have AC running or music playing in the car, and that covers up the sound of the wind noise anyway. It was very faint. Then we didn't have service probably for another 5 to 6 months until we realized some stitching was coming undone on the passenger headrest, which was a little bit concerning. And of course, the car is still in warranty, so we asked for mobile service to come out. They said that it would be covered under warranty, and technically they were only referring to the headrest. The annoying part was after they said that it should be covered under warranty, they charged us $34.50 for the guy to just come out, which is weird because in the future we had mobile service appointments that were covered under warranty and they didn't charge us for the guy to come out. I don't know if we were improperly charged or something changed. It was really weird, but that's the one service appointment we actually had to pay for. To be fair, for that $34, he did fix the headrest and it was back in tip-top shape, but I really wish I hadn't done it now because a few months went by and then we had the passenger seat sensor go bad, which I did a whole video on. Mobile service came out of state, which was kind of cool. I was not home, but they just came right to us in this cool Model S and said, let me just try to replace the sensor, and apparently that didn't fix it, so they said you need a whole new passenger seat. But we took it to the service center. They replaced the whole seat in 45 minutes. It was really quick, it was really easy, and they didn't charge us a thing. The only problem we noticed after they replaced the whole seat and it was all functional and everything was working just fine was that the headrest design had changed since they had delivered us this car versus replaced the seat. So there was some extra stitching on the driver's side headrest that was not there on the passenger side headrest. And, you know, it's not a huge problem, but we figured if it's covered under warranty, we should probably get that fixed. But this was probably the coolest mobile service we got because it was totally free, didn't cost a thing. But the service technician actually came out with both both headrest designs. He was like, do you want me to turn the new seat into the old headrest design, or should I change the old seat into the new headrest design? And we like, you know, clean, minimalistic interiors, obviously. That's why we got this car. So we decided to replace the headrest on the driver's side too, which means that within the past month, basically, both of these headrests are brand new, which is kind of cool because we didn't really have to pay extra for them. And we got a whole brand new passenger seat. So all of this stuff is brand new compared to the driver's side, which kind of gives us some comparison on how the white interior has held up, which personally couldn't be happier with. Like, it makes the car interior a lot cooler, both physically and metaphorically. It holds up really, really well. Super duper easy to clean. I've done very little to them. About 6 months into ownership, we put this leather protector liquid on it, but I don't even feel like it did all that much because before we put it on, yeah, it collects a little bit from like denim and jeans and stuff, but just with a baby wipe, you can wipe it off. The only issue I've had with the white interior is actually with the second row seats, which I don't spend a lot of time in, but the black seat belts kind of rub a little black onto the white interior. I don't know why they chose to have the seat belts rubbing there or that part of the seat be white. I feel like that was a little bit of an oversight, but overall the front and everything looks great. It's in tip-top shape, and I'm very thankful we went with the white interior. Just makes it feel a lot more luxurious and bougie without costing a heck of a lot more for the total price of the car. Plus we got the car a little bit sooner because we ordered it with the white interior, and it's almost always the first thing anyone ever brings up when they get in the car. It's like, whoa, look at these seats. They're so comfortable. They feel so nice. I don't know. I've just been in so many cars, both new and old, with black interiors, and I feel like it just doesn't stand out very much. Everybody's just kind of used to it. It's fine. It works. I'm not saying everybody needs the white interior, but if you just wanted something that was more affordable than, I don't know, the performance package or the long range package or bigger tires, which will look pretty, but make your ride more bumpy and make your efficiency worse, this doesn't hurt your efficiency, but it makes the car look a lot nicer. But of course, car data was probably the most common request I heard when I asked people, what do you want to know after 1 year of ownership? So, okay, let's just get the obvious numbers out of the way. When I charged the car to 100%, it now says 263 miles of range. We started with the EPA estimate of 272 miles of range when we first got this car, which means after 1 year of ownership and over 21,000 miles of driving, we only have 3% battery degradation, which in my opinion is really, really good. Compared to other channels I've watched, typically after that amount of miles within the first year, you would see closer to 4 or 5% degradation. But it should be noted that with all lithium-ion batteries, you notice the steepest decline of degradation within the first year. After that is usually when it tends to level out, which I feel like I am noticing. Like just within a couple months of ownership, I noticed the 100% charge was no longer getting over 270, which is totally normal, and I expected that. But I charged this car to 100% many, many times, of course, because it's lithium iron phosphate, so they encourage you to do so. But that chemistry is supposed to have higher cycle life, so I think this metric will get progressively more interesting the longer we own the car. But in the first year, yeah, it's kind of just standard. And the lifetime efficiency was another big question a lot of people had, which I'm happy to say is just 234 watt hours per mile. That's the lifetime efficiency, which in my view is really, really good. That's actually pretty close to what the EPA estimates this car will get in terms of range. But there's a lot of drives I'll do where I don't even surpass 200 watt hours per mile, which basically means this car is close to 300 miles of range if you keep it at those lower speeds and you're driving more efficiently just around the city. Yeah, overall, I think people over-exaggerate range way too much because at highway speeds, depending on the temperature, depending on your elevation, if you're going uphill or downhill, your maximum range number is going to fluctuate so much. I think people are grasping at straws when they're comparing, okay, the long range has 330 miles and this car has 270. It's like, okay, the batteries are going to degrade, and some you can charge to full and some you're not supposed to that often. Like, don't obsess too much on the max range number. In my experience, what makes the biggest difference on road trips is going to be your charging network and your charging speed, and that's something that this car is still great at. It's got NACS, it's got the supercharger network. It caps out at 170 kilowatts, but honestly, I rarely hit that, but I don't really need to because this is like a sub 60 kilowatt hour battery pack. So even though a lot of the charging sessions are just 140 kilowatts, that's still plenty. Like, that still charges up the battery really, really fast. And because the car is so efficient at 234 watt hours per mile, you know, that's over 4 miles per kilowatt hour. You don't need a ton of energy dumped into the battery pack to go on your way and continue driving because you get that range back pretty fast. So after driving this many miles in the first year, I feel very confident that standard range is fine. Personally, I think the vast majority of EVs in the future are gonna to be sub 300-mile range. Once you have a good, reliable charging infrastructure, which hopefully Tesla's going to be opening that up to everybody here in the next couple months, the max range number doesn't really matter all that much because you very rarely charge to 100%, and it's just inherently going to be cheaper to put smaller battery packs into EVs. Even in the future where we say, okay, but what if you can build a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack for, you know, $1,000 and it doesn't cost you, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 like it costs now. Okay, even if battery prices fall in the future, that's still going to apply to all battery pack sizes. You're still going to always be able to get a 50 kilowatt hour LFP battery pack for cheaper than whatever you're charging for an 80 or 100 kilowatt hour pack. And the smaller the battery pack, the lighter the vehicle, which means the less energy consumes, which means the better range it gets. So I do still think longer range EVs will exist in the future. I just think they're mostly going to be for people who live in really, really cold climates where that range is getting cut in half, or people who do a lot of towing. So pickup trucks are probably going to be more likely to have higher range options, but the vast majority of people just driving around in SUVs and sedans, I think will be totally fine with sub 300-mile range as long as they have a good charging curve and a good charging network, because the vast majority of people are driving less than 50 miles a day, and charging from home is going to be the norm, I think, for most. But anyway, a lot of you asked about build quality over the past year, about like squeaks and rattles in the car, and yeah, I was kind of expecting that because it's a Tesla and they've been known for having build quality problems, but nothing huge, nothing major. Every once in a while when we're driving around and no one's in the back seat, I do notice a little bit of a creak, but it's not very consistent. You know, sometimes I hear it, sometimes I don't. It's very faint, but I do still notice a little bit of, you know, kind of a little squeak whenever I squeeze back against these seats and push really hard against them, but I rarely ever do that. And it's very faint, so it's not a big deal. Things that I thought might go bad within the first year have not, thankfully, like the mirrors still fold fine. The powered trunk is still perfect, which I thought was going to be a bigger problem than it was, just because when I got this car, I saw other people who had the Model 3 and the powered trunk was getting misaligned over time as it went up and down a lot. I've been using it a ton. Like when I play with my nieces, they love seeing that trunk go up and down, and it still works perfectly. The alignment is still good. It's totally fine. We did get one windshield crack, which could happen to any car, but thankfully it's not growing. It's been there for the past 3 or 4 months now, and luckily it's not in my field of view, so I don't even really notice it when I'm driving, and it's not spreading, so we're just gonna leave it there until the whole windshield is basically unusable, and then we'll probably get it replaced. And as I talked about in my video about getting PPF on Teslas, there's slight rock chips, but nothing super obvious, nothing you can see from an average viewing distance. And you guys asked about moisture in the headlights or the brake lights or anything, and I've looked at them. They're totally fine. No moisture buildup, probably because I live in a very dry place. So I never looked at Tesla as like a luxury car brand anyway, so I didn't have that high expectations. So overall, just very happy that everything is still functioning and still working. But you guys asked a really big question, which I thought was kind of interesting, which was what would it take for me to change my car, as in get a different one or stop using this one? And honestly, because it's been so practical, helpful, it would have to be totaled, in my opinion, for me to consider changing. Like, there's just nothing else on the market right now that has offerings that I would utilize. Like, I've proven with all of these road trips, driving over 4,000 miles in the past month, that the higher range really doesn't translate to much. Like, I was impressed that even with the lowest range, you know, standard range Tesla, I can go for over 3 hours and not need to stop. And what I've realized with all this road tripping is usually after 3 hours, I'm ready to stop. I want to eat something or I want to use the restroom, and these seats are super comfortable. You know, they feel really luxurious, and I'm happy we have them, but anybody sitting for that amount of time starts to get a little bit tired of all of the road noise and all of the bumping, and you get hungry after that amount of time. You know, on our old car, it could go 500 miles on a tank, and we did that before. You know, we tried to make great time on road trips, but I realized I was just so much more uncomfortable, and I wasn't relaxed, and sure, we got there faster, but we spent a lot more on gas for one, and I was a lot more tired when arriving at the destination, because I didn't have the autopilot, I didn't have the adaptive cruise control, and the seats in our old car were just nowhere near as comfortable as these. My butt has just been spoiled by this car now, because anytime I get in someone else's car, I'm like, ooh, yeah, that just doesn't feel right. There's a lot of great EVs out there that I love talking about, between the Rivians and the ID4s or the Mach-E's or even the Chevy Bolts I've heard good things about, but none of them have NACS right now. None of them have the supercharger access, and even if they did, they don't have the clean minimum minimalistic interior that I love about the Model 3. I love the powered trunk. I love the exterior design. I think it's the most beautiful sedan on the market personally. And they don't have the Tesla mobile app, which is like second to none. That is by far, in my opinion, one of the most underrated perks of buying a Tesla is they get software both in the car and out of the car, like better than anybody. The over-the-air updates have been fantastic. Like when I first got this car, I couldn't minimize Tesla Theater mode and change the HVAC controls. Now I can, which I do all the time. Tesla Theater, by the way, is amazing. You can't really watch YouTube or Netflix and other cars on the market, but this one has this nice big display and all of these settings and controls. I love the auto blinker functionality so that when I signal, as soon as I complete the lane change, it automatically turns off. That's so cool. That's so futuristic. And thanks to Tesla Vision, it's capable of doing that. And you know, most recently they added a search bar to settings. They updated the UI to make it more navigational friendly so you know what your next direction is. I love how you can just tap the percentage icon to see your range number. Like there's so many smart little things that are abundantly obviously missing as soon as you switch to any other vehicle, even if it's electric, that it would take a lot to get me to switch at this point. You know, we fit 5 people in here, very practical, lots of room. I think a lot of people over exaggerate the importance of having a crossover SUV because sedans honestly can still fit a lot of crap in them. Like my wife is an amazing like Tetris level packer and she can fit so much stuff in this car and it still gets great efficiency even when the frunk and trunk are fully loaded and we've got people in the back and everything. It's just insanely practical considering how small the proportions are. It still continues to impress me whenever I park somewhere. I'm like, oh, are we gonna fit? And I get out of the car and I'm like, oh, we had space to spare. We weren't even close to hitting anything. But speaking of my wife, you guys also asked for her opinions after 1 year of ownership. So without further ado, let's ask Louise. I have to ask, the people want to know, and I'm also genuinely curious, do you have some things you like, some things you don't like? Like what are the headlining things that stand out to you in terms of, let's start with like.
Okay. I've really had a good experience with this car so far. I mean, Tesla's just a fun car to drive.
That's true.
But some of my favorite things about it would be the design. It's very appealing to the eye. It's really comfortable. It's comfortable to sit in. It's comfortable to sleep in. Like Drew and I, we car camped.
Yeah, several
overnight.
times, I think.
Yeah, so it's good for that. And the last thing that I really like about it is the ability to charge at home. It's very convenient. We haven't been charging at home since we've been using our free supercharging miles, but
yeah,
we always have that option. So I like that we don't have to go somewhere to charge.
Let's hear the damage. What do you not like?
Well, the list is pretty short of the things I don't like.
Okay.
Number 1 is the quality control issues that we've had.
Yeah, that was annoying.
So from the very beginning, we had wind noise issues, and then also the seat sensor broke in the passenger front seat.
After the headrest, we got replaced.
Right, because the headrest wasn't flush with the rest of the seat. So that's been annoying that we've had probably 5 or 6 different service appointments within 1 year, which I think is kind of crazy.
That is crazy. That's way too many. I could understand maybe 1 or 2 just because it's brand new and everything, but 6?
Yeah, they should have it figured out by now.
Yeah.
It's not like a new design or new car.
That's true. It's been in production since 2017, and
Right.
there's still little things they're like, we haven't quite figured. I'm sure it's probably better in some ways, but
yeah, and worse in some ways too.
yeah, that's the magic of Teslas. They're constantly getting better and worse simultaneously. So the big question after this is our first Tesla for the first year. First EV of any kind, but first new car. It's a lot of firsts. Ever. We've never bought a new car. Would you ever consider buying a car now that wasn't made by Tesla? Is that up for debate, or are you like Tesla sheep, Tesla only here on out?
It might surprise you guys, but I am not loyal to just Tesla.
Okay.
So I'm open to other brands. I also like Rivian. I like the Volkswagen ID4. I even like the new Priuses.
Oh, yeah.
So there's tons of different options.
We got to check out the ID4, right?
Yeah, we did. Oh, that was such a nice car.
It was comfortable.
I remember being impressed.
Yeah.
You could turn on a dime.
That was one very impressive, difference. This car does not have a great turning radius.
This turns on a pizza.
Elon was saying that the Cybertruck has better turning radius than the Model Y, and I remember thinking, that's not saying very much.
That's true.
I mean, people ask me what would I have to see to change this car, and I didn't have a very clear answer. I was like, well, maybe if this car got totaled, I'd consider it.
Yeah.
but like if we were in the market again, we're not now. But if we were in the market, what would be like a requirement? What things would you expect on the next car?
I think, oh, look at all those chickens. They're running. Sorry.
Look at all those chickens.
I think I would definitely go for a car that has NACS on it. That's the North American Charging.
That's the correct answer. Thank you.
Charging
Standard.
I was
Yeah.
going to say system, but that doesn't
That
make
works.
sense.
Yeah.
Because I really, really like the Tesla supercharging network. I think that's the most convenient. It's everywhere. And so going from a Tesla to a non-Tesla that doesn't have access to that would be hard, but I'm glad that more brands are adopting that
Yeah.
as the standard.
That shouldn't be such an exclusive thing in the future,
Right.
hopefully. But for now, it kind of is, sadly. I've heard even the cars that get NACS are mostly going to be only compatible with the V3, not the V2.
Oh, interesting.
It's a hardware thing, even though the port fits. It's like a communication protocol. This one, we don't have to worry about that. We can go to the V2s or even the V1 if there's some of those still around.
Right.
And we don't have to
Not
think
that we'd
about
want
it.
to, because
No.
they're really slow.
They are pretty slow.
But if you were just asking me what I would change about this car specifically,
Yeah.
I would say I'd like those handles, you know,
Yeah.
that are like here.
That comes up a lot, doesn't it?
I hate that. It doesn't have it. And
It's-
everyone hates that too. Everyone's always like
Everyone
wanting to
comes in
grab.
the car. Where's the handle? I've never seen a car not have those. I'm pretty sure this is the only
Yeah.
car that I've seen.
This definitely feels like a bare bones kind of car, but in a nice way. It's, you know, minimal and aesthetically pleasing. But for our next car, I'd also like something with a hatchback.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
because we have come up in situations where we need, you know, more space and things are like bulky or awkward to put in the trunk.
You made it fit, though. I gotta give you credit. You're an amazing packer.
I'm very spatially minded.
Yeah.
I like Tetris.
She's good at it. I will concede it would be probably
Yeah.
easier if the whole... Well, I still don't understand why they have that big black top section
Well,
behind
I
those
understand
seats.
it's to keep it hidden. Like I had
Mm-hmm.
a hatchback. It was a Chevrolet Aveo, and it had that thing, that black cover.
Oh,
so
it's
that
like
you
a
could,
parcel shelf, they call it, or something?
Yeah, it might be for shelving or extra storage, but I thought it was just to protect the stuff that you had inside. Like if you
Oh,
had
okay.
valuables, you don't want people to be able to see it.
That's fair. The older Model Ys didn't have that, which is why I was confused when you say things like, well, it's to, you know, hide the trunk space. Because I was like, in the Y, everybody can see back there. You can just look and
Well,
see.
that's poor design, I guess.
But they added the shelf now, so.
yeah.
But it's still removable, you know. So I wish
It's up
they
to
did
you.
that with the 3. So, like, you
Yeah.
could take it out if you wanted to.
I don't
but-
think it really makes a big difference. We don't really use that.
Probably not, yeah.
Yeah, since Drew likes to go mountain bike riding, I feel like if we had a hatchback that would let us bring a bike places.
True. Or a tow
be
hitch.
helpful.
You could. The Model 3 doesn't have like a first-party solution. Knowing what we know now about Teslas and pricing and what we got, like, if you could go back to when we were ordering, what would you change? Would you tell yourself to do something differently?
Yeah, I think I would have just been more patient, I guess, and waited another year since pricing went down a lot, like 10 grand.
Yeah.
And the Model Y was actually the model that I wanted the most. That would have been like my preference, but we had already been waiting like 3 years and I felt bad, you know, making Drew wait even longer. But had I known,
Yeah. We had played that game a lot. We had played that game with, well, let's just wait a little longer.
yeah.
So it was hard to, after 3 years, be like, well, let's wait a little longer because
Yeah, we did the best with the knowledge we had at the time, but yeah, I would have waited 1 year and gotten the Model Y instead because that was the one I wanted.
Yeah, that's pretty much what everybody's doing now. It's
But the Model 3 is still a
best-selling.
great car,
They're very close.
to be fair.
Honestly.
Yeah, just the hatchback I think is the main difference.
Yeah, and it sits a little taller, but yeah, I've been in this 3 now more than any other Tesla. Still, whenever I check out a Model Y or sit in a Model Y, it feels so close.
Yeah,
They're
you
so
can't really
similar.
tell when you're sitting in
When
it.
you're just sitting and driving, like the vast majority of ownership, it doesn't really make a huge impact. But now that the prices have come down a lot, do you think you would opt for the long range or the standard range?
I haven't really looked at the pricing of each one, but
There's like,
is the long range about as much as we paid for this car?
it's a little more. It would have been before, just the purchase price before taxes and everything. It would have been over 50. So it
Yeah,
would have
I
cost
think-
a little more. But
I think I would have gotten the long range. I
Yeah.
mean, if we waited another year, we would have had more time to save
that's true. Yeah.
for it anyways.
Hindsight's 2020. Would you ever consider going back to a gas car after all this?
Ooh, that's a hard question. Having an EV is pretty convenient with the home charging, like I mentioned, but I'm not really a classist. I don't know if that's the word.
I hope it's not a class thing.
Yeah,
but,
no,
yeah.
I have nothing against gas cars. I mean, I loved having a gas car at the time, other than, you know, the expensive gas prices, but I loved how they had longer ranges typically. I mean, our Hyundai Sonata that we still have could go 500 miles on a single gas tank.
Yeah.
Which was amazing. If we needed a second car, I think that would be the smarter choice, is to go with like a used Toyota Camry or a Honda Civic, just because they are cheaper up front, even if the cost to maintain them is a little bit more. The break-even point would be like 20 years versus, you know, our
True.
very
It's kind of
expensive
nice.
new Tesla.
Yeah. It's kind of nice to have like a second car that you don't care much about. That's just like other people can drive it, and
Right.
you can loan it out, and it doesn't cost too much to own. As long as you're not like doing a ton of commuting with it, then the cost to own it can get pretty affordable.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I miss about our other cars. Like, our insurance is only $40 a month for car insurance,
It's very cheap.
and the maintenance is actually pretty low. Like, we don't really do much other than change the oil every once in a while.
Yep.
Although, just today, we're having issues with the Sonata, so now it's like, oh, okay, I forgot gas cars have all these other problems like spark plugs and starters and all that.
It's kind
Don't
of a-
regret going with a Tesla.
Yeah, this is kind of the exact time where I'm like, well, I'm very glad we have it now. You know, we could have waited. You could always wait. There's always going to be better deals
Right.
the longer you wait. My go-to hypothetical, if this car was totaled or something, and we got, you know, it wasn't our fault. We got a big insurance payout by it and everything. I would be really tempted to go with one of these used Model 3s that I've seen on inventory that are like under 30.
See, I don't think I would do that.
No?
Just because I already tried the Model 3 and it's not the original one I wanted, so why not go with like a used Model Y? Even if it's a little bit more
okay.
expensive.
I see what you're saying. Go a
Or
little
even
higher.
a new Model Y is only
Yeah.
like 40 grand. I mean, I say only, but we paid like 52 grand for this brand new Model 3, so
After taxes and stuff, but
yeah.
yeah, I guess that would be the standard range one, but we've established the range isn't a huge concern.
No, I don't think we hardly get range anxiety, even on
No.
long road trips, and we've traveled like over 3,000 miles just in the past month.
Yeah, that really was such a myth. I feel like people online really
Yeah.
made that seem like a bigger deal than it was. Yeah, I guess used Model Y prices would be a lot better now too, now that there's so many of them. So
Yeah.
definitely used though, you think? Probably wouldn't go new again.
No, definitely not. I think this was just like our once in a lifetime experience buying a
Sure.
new car. It's been your dream since you were like 16.
That's
So I
true.
wanted you to be able to fulfill that dream.
Thank you.
And-
Thank you. Well, I just wanted it at the time that was cheaper. The used ones were crazy expensive.
Right.
That was a weird time in the car market, but now it's kind of stabilizing. But final thoughts or other things you want them to know before we wrap up?
Tesla is a great brand. It's a great car, but I also think you shouldn't put all your loyalty into one brand. I think just find the car that works for you, whether it's new or used. Yeah, no regrets buying this car. I've really enjoyed it, even though it's cheaper now. I wouldn't change a thing, you know, because we've had a lot of really cool road trip experiences with this car
That's true.
just in the past year. Yeah, that's all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Of course. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.
And thanks again for everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.